Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel. And today we have with us another special guest, and he goes by the name of Michael Clark. Michael Clark is a territory manager with atTerumo Interventional Systems in the endovascular space. But I'm going to stop there. If you don't know what the endovascular space is, you're about to find out. And if you don't know who Michael Clark is, again, you're about to find out. This is an episode you absolutely don't want to miss. As always, we'll do our best to bring you guests that are doing things differently in the medical sales space. And I really do hope you enjoy this interview. Hey, Michael, how are we doing today?
Doing fantastic, Sam. How are you?
No complaints. Why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
All right. Michael Clark, and I work for a company called atTerumo Interventional Systems in the endovascular space. So essentially calling on interventional cardiologists, interventional radiologists, and vascular surgeons. And, we do everything essentially from access to closure and everything in between, wires, balloons, stents. It's a pretty big bag that our division handles. And the nice thing about that is it's every day is different. You get into a ton of different cases, and it's pretty fun.
That sounds fun. So when you say pretty big bag, give us a gauge, give some context around that.
Yeah.
We're talking about how many products?
Yeah. So typically in the endovascular space, it's not unusual to go into a cath lab. Let's use that as an example. And you've got companies like Boston Scientific, CSI, all these companies that are in there, and they're typically they have reps that are dedicated to the cath lab. So they're selling balloons, they're selling their stents, they're selling their wires. We are obviously in the cath lab, but we also are going into the interventional radiology, the lab in IR, and selling our wires, our coils, our stuff like that. So it's unusual for a company to have a rep, I think, cover so many different specialties. atTerumo has entrusted that to their sales force.
Mm-hmm.
And with that comes a lot of responsibility and a lot of time management and a lot of planning. But they seem to have a pretty good track record, and it's a well thought of company. And I've been with them for 3 years, and the sales force and the people that I've met are second to none. So it's pretty nice.
That's awesome. So what does the team make up? Is it just you in charge of a territory? Do you have a clinical specialist? Do you have other different types of sales that you work with? Give us the idea of how a team looks on.
So since I've been with atTerumo, that's evolved a little bit. There's always been typically territory managers, and then there's clinicals that will support cases and whatnot, because just geographically, obviously, you can't be everywhere at once. Most of the clinicians who are the clinical specialists, they usually come from a lab. Many of them come from a cath lab or have IR backgrounds or whatnot. But we've also now evolved to where we have associate sales reps, to where maybe they're not as seasoned per se, but they come in at an associate level, and they're in there and they're growing and they're learning, and then eventually I think the plan is obviously for those individuals to get their own territory. So it's definitely, for instance, just for my example, I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina. My counterpart that's in the Raleigh-Durham area, he and I share an associate sales rep as well as a clinical. And, we've got to strategize and use the resources that we're given, to the best of our ability, and try to plan accordingly and try to plan ahead. And that's kind of how it's structured now. And we really work as a team. We come together and we have our targets, and we come together to, execute on the plan as almost as a group, as a regional business team is what they kind of call it.
That's awesome. And let's get a little bit deeper into that. Walk us through a day in the life. What does a day look like for you? Give us your busiest day. When are you waking up? What are you doing first? Walk us through the whole thing.
Well, as in the medical device world, you can plan as best you can, and things come about and things get changed. But I'll give you a typical day. I mean, For me, it's probably a little, different from me. My territory geographically is large, meaning that Wilmington is my hub. I pretty much go 2 hours in every direction from Wilmington. So I'm right on the coast, for those who don't know where Wilmington is or aren't familiar with the geographic area. And so I go an hour and a half south to Myrtle Beach. I go inland a couple hours, and I go up the coast a couple hours. So I've got to, I can't be one of those reps that goes to an account just on a whim, hoping to get somewhere or hoping to catch up with someone. And that's my only, that's the only thing I've got in my, what I'm going to try to accomplish today. And then that person's not there or something falls apart. And well, I've just wasted 4 hours of drive time. And obviously when you're driving 2 hours one way and 2 hours back, 4 hours, that's, you can't be successful if you're relying on that. So I try to plan as best as possible. And so a busy day would be getting up. Most cath labs start, let's say, using that cath lab as an example, most cath labs start at about 8 a.m. So I'm going to get up and get in there, well before they start, if I've scheduled a day in the cath lab. And then, not sure if you're familiar with cath labs or whatnot, but, the cath labs I've got are pretty busy. There's multiple interventional cardiologists that are in there on a daily basis, and they're going to have multiple cases. And those rooms are going to be going pretty much from 8 o'clock in the morning till, depending on add-ons or whatnot, 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. And there's really, on a busy day, there's really no break time. I mean, there's not even really a break to eat lunch. I mean, it's pretty much you're working straight through. Yeah. It's a tiring day, but those are great days because you feel like you really had time. You've gotten to have good one-on-one time with that interventional cardiologist. There's usually targets in that account that you're trying to work with to, execute your business plan. And so that's what a big day like that would entail. Now, sometimes we get called to support, certain cases, an embo case that's a big embo case. And so with that comes a lot of pre-case planning. You often get with the doctor ahead of time. You see images, you kind of get an idea of what we're trying to treat. Oftentimes, again, I've only been with TERUMO for 3 years. There's people that have been with this company for a lot longer than I am and know a lot more than I do. And so I'll reach out in that pre-planning stage and try to get to where I'm as prepared as possible, so that should something arise in the case unexpected, I'm there and I can provide that support for the doctor, to where the most important thing is obviously the welfare of the patient, that patient gets the best treatment. That's kind of the goal for every day and every procedure. But that's kind of, those are the different kinds of days. You got some big cases that are pre-planned, and then a day like in the cath lab, you don't really have pre-planning because they're going in there to oftentimes to see what's wrong with the patient. They don't know what's wrong sometimes until they go in there and do a diagnostic, cath, and then they realize that certain arteries are blocked, and then, they execute and go ahead and treat it.
And so in those situations, you're the one on the floor. Are your competitors also amongst?
Yeah, every lab's different. I mean, some labs, they ask you to, they have a calendar, for instance, and sign up. So, if I'm coming in on this particular day, unless there's an absolute need for another rep to be in there for whatever reason, that they're using some of their equipment and they need them in there for support, then yes, you're going to run into other reps. There are some labs maybe that aren't as structured or don't require that. And then, so yeah, for those types of labs, it's not unusual to run into, your competitors all the time. But I think what COVID did, if anything, for a while, no one was allowed in labs for a long time. And then I think as that subsided, I think that a lot of the managers, at least in my area and my territory, they got to the point where they, I think they saw the value a little bit in trying to, I guess, minimize the amount of just drop-ins. You want to be respectful of what they're trying to do, the healthcare providers, and you want to support them. But, I think the reps that get that and work with the managers and whatnot are the ones that have the most success, obviously.
Got it. And then when does the day end, and what you bring the work home? What happens?
In sales, you're never not, I guess, on call. I don't really have, I know there are some sales reps jobs out there that you actually are on call and they can call you at 2 a.m. and you've got to answer the bell. I mean, technically, I guess if I got a call and said, hey, we got an embo case that came in, or that's coming in, that's emergent, that would be an instance, but that happens rarely. So when my day is done, and again, it can be at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And then, you know, sometimes it's earlier than that, obviously, as well. But I don't have, other than, you know, work and busy work type stuff on the computer, answering emails and whatnot. You know, I think you have to have a work-life balance. And so you try to do the best you can. So.
Got it. Okay. Let's dial it back a little bit. You know,
Yeah.
you've been with TERUMO for 3 years, but you came from Stryker.
Yeah. So I got into the medical device industry with Stryker. So that was about 2010, and I worked for Stryker Surgical for about 8 years. Great company, great time with Stryker. But that was, I lived at the time, I lived in the northeastern part of Indiana. So my territory kind of was southern Michigan, northeastern Indiana. My family and most of my family had relocated down to, extended family had relocated to Wilmington, North Carolina. So in the back of my wife and I's mind, we wanted to get down to North Carolina at some point. And my son, just so happened, he graduated high school in 2018, went to college at Elon University in North Carolina. And he wanted to go to school somewhere in North Carolina. So we kind of had that in the back of our minds. Okay, we need to start looking to get down to North Carolina. And so about in 2017, I started putting feelers out. I tried to stay with Stryker within the surgical division I was in hopes that something would open up down there. Nothing did. And so then I kind of cast a wider net. And actually what brought me to North Carolina was Hologic. I actually got an opportunity to come work for the surgical division within Hologic.
Sure.
A lot of Stryker, ex-Stryker folk had gone to Hologic, their leadership and whatnot. And so I thought it would be a great fit. And Hologic's a great company to work for. And I worked for them for about 2 years. And while working for them is when the TERUMO opportunity came. And when that opportunity came my way, it was just, you know, for me, it was just too good to kind of pass up on. So Hologic got me down to North Carolina, and it was a great experience. But TERUMO is what, you know, the opportunity, the job I have now is what I'm excited about and happy to have for the last 3 years.
Yeah. And when you stepped into the interventional system space with TERUMO, did you know enough about that space already that you know this is where I want to be, or was it a completely new world that you just wanted to dive into?
Man, it was a completely new world. So it was crazy. I had a lot of things, I guess, going against me, in that I got my offer to join TERUMO the exact week that COVID started.
Wow.
So I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, March of 2020 is when they said, hey, here's your offer letter. And literally the next week, everything shut down.
Wow.
I mean, everything.
Wow.
So here's someone that knows really little about the endovascular space. I'm supposed to be, I think initially our training dates were like in May. So I had March and April kind of just to, you know, get into cases, follow people, shadow people, learn as much as I can. And then of course, May comes around and they cancel in-person training. And not sure how much you know about the endovascular space, but wires and closure devices, and these things are real tactile things, and to learn how to manipulate and whatnot, and to not be in person learning about this stuff was a real detriment to my learning curve. And so TERUMO did a great job at doing online learning. And our class, I think our class was the only class and first and only class that went through the entire training. And TERUMO has a very extensive training program, but ours was entirely virtual. Wow. And so, you know, as part of my region, I'm one of, I don't know, 8 or 9 guys and girls that make up my region. I don't think I met anyone in person in my region for like 2 years. I mean, other than my manager and, you know, the guy that's in Raleigh, Durham. I mean, that was it. I mean, so that was tough. I mean, it was, I felt like I actually was thinking about that today. The 2 years of during COVID felt like it was weird. I was like in I don't know, another world, because I look back at it now and I feel like, man, that went really quick. 2 years went quick. It went by quick. Like, what was it was just nuts. So
yeah, no, it was like what is that show called? Twilight Zone.
Exactly. It was like Twilight Zone. So before I got the job and talking to people that worked for TERUMO, I said, you know, what's it take? How long does it take for you to kind of figure out where you feel comfortable, you know, what you're doing? And most of the people I spoke to said it's going to be, you know, first of all, in this space, it's always changing, and there's technologies that are always changing. So you're always learning. I mean, you are always learning, and there's
Right.
new procedures and new techniques. But they basically said that it would take about a year to feel comfortable in normal times. I think mine was double that probably. It took me 2 years, I think, because of COVID and
Makes
how
sense.
my learning
Makes
curve was just
sense.
messed up. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was quite the adventure for sure.
Okay. Let's define a couple things for the audience because I want to start getting into, if someone's thinking about getting into the vascular space, why
Mhm.
should they? Let's start with cath lab. Go ahead and define cath lab for the green listeners that have no idea what that is.
Yep. So cath lab, you have what you call interventional cardiologists, meaning that you've got cardiologists that will go and sometimes they'll just do a diagnostic. So let's say someone goes in and for whatever reason they're not feeling well, they have chest pains, their test results shows elevated levels of certain things, whatever that may be, they're going to come in for a heart cath. Okay, so heart cath is basically they're going to access your arteries, they're going to go up with a diagnostic catheter, and they're going to shoot your right and left coronaries, and they're going to see if there's any blockages. As simple as that. And they're going to get a picture of the flow dynamics of your heart and whatnot, and kind of just check those things out to make sure everything's okay. There are certain doctors that only do diagnostic procedures, so they're just going to do that. And let's say that they see something, they may, if they see something, they would pass that on to an interventional cardiologist. A lot of cardiologists who are working in the cath lab do both diagnostic and interventional cardiologists, but there are some that just do diagnostic. So once they do that diagnostic, shot with through the catheter, and let's say they see your right coronary has a blockage, or it's just the flow is being restricted. Okay, at that point they're going to then switch out catheters, and they're going to go into a catheter that's basically used for interventions. It's got more body to it, because there's potentially they're going to be putting balloons through that catheter, they're going to be putting stents through that catheter. So you want a catheter that's able to handle those types of things and give you support to be able to push those things through. And so at that point, they're going to go ahead and they're going to treat the patient. Usually, these procedures, obviously, they depending on access, depending on how complicated the lesion is, and if there's multiple lesions, I mean, it can take a few hours. But I would say, the majority of the time, these cases are like an hour or so long. It's not super long cases, but that's essentially what the cath lab has, and it's personally, it's been one of them. It's a fun. I love it. It's a fun environment. I've not gone into a cath lab yet where the people just haven't been awesome. The people, the patients are obviously very thankful, and that's part of what I like about the endovascular space. Whether you're doing work in the cath lab or work with peripheral arterial disease, these patients who are diabetic, these patients who have been smokers their whole life. Oftentimes they have poor circulation in their legs. Mm-hmm. And as a result, wounds don't heal. You need blood to heal your wounds. And so, I'm often in cases where, we use our products to get to the lesion, cross that lesion. And once they cross it, there's arthrectomy devices that'll go ahead and almost like roto-root if you know what a roto-rooter is, they roto-root the plaque or the calcium that's in the leg. And then they sometimes balloon and stent and whatnot. And the neat thing about endovascular space, whether it's the cath lab or whether it's this, you see immediate results. So, it's not like other procedures that, when I was with Stryker and I sold the power tools and like the saws and the drills and whatnot for total knees and total hips. I know that they're doing great things for that patient, but as a rep, I didn't, you see them do the work, and when the case is over, you leave, that patient's pretty much knocked out still on the, you don't really see the end result. I mean, it was a good surgery or whatnot. In a peripheral case, PAD case, they open up that, maybe it's the SFA artery in your thigh, and it all of a sudden you got all this flow to your lower limb, and that patient, whatever it is, an ulcer, that's something that's not healing, that's going to heal. The patient can sometimes feel it right away. They're like, it just feels different. That's pretty satisfying to be in those types of cases and see that immediate effect. So
that is awesome. Cool. Absolutely. What are maybe the top 3 things you would say someone should consider about themselves or check if they want to jump into the endovascular space like yourself?
So this is someone that's already in medical device world, or just in general, just jumping into that space, just, coming from outside the medical device.
Yeah, maybe coming from outside and wanting to be an associate.
Yeah.
What do they need to make sure they have coming to the table?
Well, I mean, if anything, I felt like when I joined TERUMO, I went back to college. I mean, honestly, you have to learn a ton of things. I mean, you have to learn the arterial system. You have to learn just a lot of things, and like I said, it's never ending. So you have to have that desire, I guess, that will to just really know that you're coming into something that you're going to have to really commit to learn. Obviously, I think with anything, really, any medical device specialty that you're trying to get into, coachability is huge and important. Just being, I think it's almost, goes without saying that competitiveness, that you need to have that competitive fire, because it is a competitive business, man. I mean, there's a lot of great companies out there.
Yeah.
I've been real fortunate that I feel like, and I don't think I'm being biased, but I really do feel like I found companies that I've been fortunate to work for that provide the best products. And they're almost never the cheapest products. There are competitors out there that do provide, and that's their niche, is they provide products that are a lot cheaper, and that's kind of how they go, and that's their tactic in selling it. And so, I guess just do your homework, go with a company that's got a great reputation, and any doctor will tell you straight up. I mean, and that's before I took the TERUMO job. I went and actually, I knew nothing about this space. I went to some vascular surgeons and said, "Hey, do you mind if I work with you on some of these days? Do you mind if I could just come into your case?" And I asked them questions about TERUMO, and nothing but great things that they had to say, and that feedback really helped me make my decision. And so I would just do your homework as much as you can if you're trying to get into the space. It is a great space to go into, and there's lots of opportunity. I mean, this space is blowing up and it's growing. From different arthrectomy devices that are out there to, just different types of companies that are, being bought up by some of the big boys that are out there. And so it's a great space to be in.
Awesome. One thing that I don't think is talked about enough is the work-life balance of a medical sales rep. And it looks different depending on the field, the nuance. Yeah. But let's speak to your field. Do you have a family? Do you have kids and a wife at home? And, how do you make it all work in life?
Yeah. So, I had a career before medical device, so I'm a little bit older than some. So my kids we're empty nesters, my wife and I. I guess that's nice from the fact that, I don't have to come home and get my kid to a soccer game or something like that.
Sure.
We did all that, and when I was with Stryker, that was often the case. So that was tough. So now I've got a little bit more freedom from that perspective. But you still want to do things. I live in a beautiful community where, I love to go out and fish. I love to go on the boat. I love to do those types of things. So, I mean, you've got to do those things because the medical device world is very competitive. Like I said, it's very rewarding. But you got to make sure. The one thing I've always told myself, and I think this kind of garners back to, there's a lot of athletes that are in the medical device world. And I think the one thing that benefits that mindset is you never want to get too high and you never want to get too low, because as soon as that year is over, your quota is over, and you made that quota, you may have one day to kind of revel in that, and then the next day you've got a new quota. So I mean, you don't have time to rest on your laurels, and your competition is certainly not doing that. And so that's the important thing, is that you do have to have a good work-life balance so you don't burn yourself out, but you always gotta, you're always grinding. So
that's awesome. And then for those that want to get into the space that are already in medical sales and maybe they're coming from a different field, what would you say they should definitely think about when coming into the vascular space?
Yeah, so I would, as a medical sales rep, we're in our cars a lot, or at least I am. My territory, like I said, was geographically pretty large, and so you listen to a lot of podcasts or a lot of different people, and one of the things that I've learned. I don't know if I've heard of Dave Ramsey. He's a guy that talks about money and about making sure that your money, your life's in order on that aspect. And he talks about one of his guys that works for him talks about the proximity principle. And I think it's important that if you want to be in the endovascular space, if you're in medical, even if you're not in the medical device world, but you want to get in the medical device world, or you are in the medical device world and want to go in the endovascular space, I really believe in that proximity principle. LinkedIn is a great tool, and there's other tools, but just reach out to people, ask questions, befriend. I mean, I've met so many people that work for other companies or that have reached out to me, and I really haven't met a person that isn't won't just get on the phone with you for 5-10 minutes and talk. And you'd be amazed at how many connections can be made. And if you see a job that you're interested in, try to reach out to people and that are working for that company, because if you can make that connection, your chances of getting if you can reference someone that works for that company in your resume or when you're talking with that recruiter or whoever's posting for that job, it goes a long way. So I mean, just get with those people, talk to them. It just shows that you have a true interest and a true desire to join the company or to get whatever it is that you're trying to do, and it shows a lot. So I would recommend that proximity. Just surround yourself with those types of people and learn as much as you can.
Absolutely. Well, before we bring this to a close, we're going to have a little bit of a lightning round.
Nice.
I'm going to ask you 4 questions. You got about 10 seconds to answer. So the best is to go with what first comes to mind.
Oh, no.
You ready?
This is where you get in trouble, man. All right, go ahead.
All right, first question. What is the best book you've read in the last 6 months?
Whew. The best book I've read in the last 6 months. Probably Lincoln, the Abraham Lincoln book. It was just a biography. I'm a huge, what I mostly read are biographies and historical. I don't do a lot of fiction, so I'm a big history buff. So it's a book on Lincoln.
Excellent. Any pearls from it you can share?
Well, it was just the fact that he was able to, it's actually a lot of pearls that I garnered from it. So the fact that he was able to cobble together a team around him, and at such a time that was obviously a very contentious time in our country's history, that he took people that didn't agree with him, that pretty much hated him, but he still brought them onto his team. Wow. Because he wanted to hear all different, we would probably could take a lesson out of that book today with the way politics are, but he didn't care. He didn't want yes men around him. He wanted people challenging him, people that didn't believe in the things that he believed in. So he surrounded himself with people that would challenge him. And I think that was a great lesson I learned from it. If you're a leader, you don't want yes men. You want people that are going to challenge you. And obviously, that's what he did. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Best TV show or movie you've seen in the last 6 months?
Well, the best movie of all time, in my opinion, is Godfather, and that's on TV all the time.
Man, can't even argue.
I have seen that on TV in the last 6 months, and that's my favorite movie of all time. So I'd have to say that. As far as a TV show goes, that's a tough one. I'm a big fan of the whole Dutton trilogy, that trilogy, that 1883, 1923. I'm in the middle of that, or the 1923, I think, has one more episode. I love that series. So that's probably my favorite series right now.
That's cool. And then best meal you've had in the last 6 months?
Ooh, dang! I'm a kind of a self-proclaimed chef in my household. I just cooked something last night that was pretty phenomenal. But it was again, I have the benefit of getting fresh seafood here in Wilmington, and so I had it was a red coconut curry sauce that I made with mahi that I basted the mahi in that, and I served it over rice, and it was some other stuff in there. Wow. It was really good.
Man, you're gonna have to make a YouTube video. The link in the show notes. All right, and then lastly, what's the best experience you've had in the last 6 months?
The best experience I had, probably my dad just celebrated his 92nd birthday. Wow. And we had an awesome birthday party to where, and he's still very healthy and still golfs, wow. Shoots his age for 9 wow. and a half, his half. I come from a big family, and we had it at our house, and I cooked a big rack of lamb for everybody that night, and it was just a great night. It was fun to spend time. I spend any second I can spend with him, I do, and that was probably the best time I've had in the last 6 months.
That is fantastic. Michael, it was a pleasure staying with us today and talking to us a little bit about the endovascular space. Keep on doing amazing things. We'll be watching you, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Appreciate it, man. It was great meeting you. Take care.
And that was Michael Clark in the endovascular space. Fascinating space. He's been making so many career strides in such a short amount of time, including working for Stryker and Hologic. Some of you are listening to this right now, and you're thinking to yourselves, how do I mimic a career like Michael? How do I even get to be a part of what he's been able to be a part of? Companies like Stryker or Hologic, or working yourself in the endovascular space. If you've listened to this podcast for any amount of time, you already know what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it again. If this field, medical sales, all of it, medical device, pharmaceutical, genetic, diagnostic, if this interests you, if you want to be a professional and be either responsible for the sale of drugs and devices or responsible for the utilization of drugs and devices by healthcare providers, then you need to visit evolveyoursuccess.com. Don't think about it anymore. Don't ponder over it. Don't say one day, maybe I'll try. Just go to the site, evolveyoursuccess.com. Fill out the application and have a conversation with one of our account specialists and learn how your career might be the next one to find that career on a podcast. As always, we do our best to bring you guests that are doing things differently in the medical sales space. And I hope you tune in next week for another episode of the Medical Sales Podcast.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.